Greetings and welcome to another Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team video, where today I'm covering the May tournament stats for the global events and Kill Team, as well as the Quarter 2 stats, covering what will basically show what Games Workshop may hit or buff when it comes to the latest balanced data slate at the end of June. But before we get into things, please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of today's video. Do you like the stats? What do you think? And remember, I've got a Discord you can check down in the episode description below, an affiliate link Element Games, and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. But yeah, as always, thanks goes to Smiles, Lies, Gunfire, who helped basically sort this all out for me, gathered all the stats. And, we've got some updated charts and layouts today, which should look a little bit more clearer. And remember, we've got all our data from the Best Coast Pairings tournament app. If you don't use the BCP app, you can message us and then we can manually add your stats. But that's where we get all our data, and that's where it's all collected from. And as I said, today I'll be going over the May stats, as well as the current Quarter 2 stats from the previous balanced data slate, which is just about over 8 weeks, to basically get an average of the data being used, and basically kind of see what Games Workshop may hit or nerf or buff. So Smiles, Lies and Gunfire has also made a website hosting all the stats. So now you can basically look through all the tournament stats we've been posting, and after this video they'll go live as well for the current month and the current time period, so you can look through them at your own leisure and play around with that. He'll be expanding it as time goes on. It's still quite early days, so just give us some feedback and it'll be down in the episode description for free if you want to check it out as well. So first off, we have the countries. Notably, we have had some changes with the Kill Team stats for May. Notably, we've had less players, even though we've had the same number of events. So this month had a bit of a dip in players, and we've also excluded factions that have 10 games or less because it's not really accurate. So there may be some less factions when you see May, just because we've had a weird allocation of players, probably because, well, Kill Team has too many factions now. But as you can see, here is the updated map of where people are playing globally, and we've included a heat source to, the darker it is, the more concentrated the number of players is. So obviously United States are leading the way in terms of player density, and then Spain, and then United Kingdom, and then Russia, and then Argentina for this month as well. So for the May win rates, as I said, with factions that have 10 or less players, we have, 10 or less games, we haven't included them, because the weird thing when it's come to this month, because Kill Team has so many factions now, it looks like players are starting to move away from factions that basically aren't interesting to them anymore, which isn't bad considering we have 34 factions now, 36, which is way more than 40k on other game systems. So going from the top, Void Dancer troops with 19 games have a 66% win rate, which, isn't the biggest number of games, but it's still pretty good in terms of, well, they actually haven't gone below 50% since they've been nerfed. Last month they won 2 events, but still, good win rate. Then Galapox Infected with a 58% win rate with 110 games, so pretty good there. Hand of the Archon, 86 games with a 58 win percentage. Wormblade with 86 games on 58% as well. Pathfinders on 155 games, becoming super popular, now on a 57% win rate, which is probably fine. Hierotech with 243 games on a 57% win rate. So very, very danger Will Robinson there. Then Blooded, oddly, on 126 games with a 57% win rate. And, Blooded, they've been going up and down, but they've been really popular this month, so they've come back into fashion. Then we have Inquisitorial Agents at 93 games with a 56% win rate. So those are our top overperformers, because remember, looking for 55% to 45% as the healthy range, and then anything above 55 is danger, and anything below 45 isn't great either. Then for below 45, so Warp Coven technically has 44.9, but that's 45%, so Warp Coven are technically fine. Blades of Cain, this month down to 44%. I think this is their worst month ever, but they only have 77 games. Then Intercession with 223 games on 43%. Farstalker Kinban dropping down to 92 games with a 43% win rate. Justian with 40 games with a 43% win rate. Compendium overall at 42. Then we have Kazakin with 133 games down to 42%. And Scouts dropping their players considerably to 66 with a 41% win rate. So notably, we've got more factions underperforming this month. Scouts just showing that people are kind of just giving up on this faction, which is disappointing. I mean, they really should have been buffed in the last balanced data slate, but you know, they're showing they're not doing well at all. And then if we look at the healthy range, we actually have a well-populated number of factions. Oddly, Chaos Cult only on 35 games, Exaction on 66, but Nemesis Claw are the most popular faction with 330 games and a 54% win rate. So they're amazing. They're doing really well at the moment. Commandos holding out at 54% on 237 games. Mandrakes with 348 games, the most popular faction in the game right now. Everyone's so hot about Mandrakes, 52%, which is probably okay. And yeah, we've just got a decent spread in the middle. So Legionaries staying solid at 46. Even Vet Guard holding at 47%. So pretty stable when it comes to win rates. And here is the updated chart with everything rounded up more correctly, so you can see it better. As I said, orange is basically fine, yellow bad, red bad. So, you know, as you can see, Warp Coven just sitting there at 45%. Quite the drop compared to what they had before. And yeah, just a really balanced spread for the most part, right? It's only Void Dancer Troop that swing out the most, but that's because they have the lowest number of players. Then once again, we have the placings data here, including the picked rate, gold, so first place podiums, 1 to 3, and then how many times a faction went 3 and 1. And then we've also got their percentage placement data, so that just in percentage form. So when we go to the charts, for the placing charts, you can see that Nemesis Claw had 19 podiums with 10 event wins and the highest ratio of 3-to-1 results. Then Mandrakes, then Higher Tech Circle, then Commandos, and then Pathfinders, right? Pathfinders, they won 6 events and they are podiumed 11 times, which I'm sure is very much fine. Even Vet Guard, so Vet Guard, they won 4 events and podiumed 6 times, despite their basically average win rate. Then you've got Hunter Clade, so they won 3 events and podiumed 7 times, so they've been doing quite well, even though their win rate's just been okay. And even Galapox, who have been rocking the events in terms of win rates, they've only won 1 event and they've only had 6 podiums. So they've been quite popular, and even though their win rate is high, they actually haven't been reflecting it too much in tournament statistics, well, results-wise, compared to the other kill teams. And then look, even Chaos Cult, even with their low usage, they've won 1 event and podiumed twice. So despite them having a low volume of players, they've actually done pretty well. And most of the factions pictured basically have won an event, apart from Breachers, Justian, and Scouts. And then for the percentage ratings for the placements, you can see the ratio of how much they place and how many times they go 3 and 1. Void Dancers out at top, but not really accurate. Wormblade doing really well. Pathfinders averaging out of that really well as well. Hunterclade having a higher number of 3 and 1s than they're actually placing. Just mirroring how they're not actually doing as well overall, because we've had to, I know Hunterclade have been rocking some events, but we've had to exclude some events, which I'll probably get to in the end of the video. But otherwise, Hunterclade have been doing okay. And then you've got Mandrake. So it's an interesting spread for the placing data. So this is the tournament stats for GT Plus win rates. So we have Wormblade. So remember, GT Plus is 4 or more rounds with 16 or more players. So Wormblade are on 68%, Inquisition on 67%. Then we have Galapox on 65%, Chaos Cult on 63%, but only with 12 games. Pathfinders on 60%, Hunterclade on 59%, but with only 22 games. Then we have Hyrotech on 59% as well. Then we also have Exaction doing much better in long format than they are doing overall with 57%, Phobos at 57% as well. So quite a change from normal events when we go to GT Plus. And then for underperforming teams, we have Breachers at 43%, Vet Guard oddly at 43%, Blades of Cain at 41%, Intercession at 40%, Kazakin dropping down to 39%, Scouts down to 35%, and then Farstalkers down to 35% as well. So as you can see in the chart, we've got a much more wider split, but of course GT Plus includes less results because it's a more refined value, but still interesting to see how factions that were doing quite well overall have done a lot worse when it goes to GT Plus. And also when you factor into how many events have won, it doesn't really correlate with some of the win rates we're seeing, like notably with Vanguard. Then for GT placing, here's all the placement data. And then for the charts, as we can see in GT Plus, Hieratech, they won 3 events, podiuming 8 times. Pathfinders also won 3 events in GT Plus, podiuming 6 times. Then Commandos won 2 events. Galapox won 1, so the 1 event they won was in GT Plus, which is pretty good, with 4 podiums. And then as you can see, most of the other factions up to Novitiates have won 1 event, which is still pretty good. And then here's the placement data for percentage wise. And for the chart, once again, Void Darts is a 100% chance to go 3-1 and place 100%, but that's because, remember, low player numbers. But Pathfinder showing a worryingly high correlation of 47%, in terms of 47% of their games they either went 3-1, well, tournament wise, and placed the same amount. So not very good there. Galapox having a higher 3-1 ratio than they placed. Same with Hunterclade, but most factions even out. Then we have GT Long. So GT Long is for events with 6 or more rounds and 30 or more players. So Galapox with 26 games, so 71%. Inquisition rock up to 68%. Exaction up to 64%. Pathfinders at 61%. Halfkin somehow at 60%, jumping way above how they did overall. Corsairs at 60%, Hieratech at 59%, Wormblade at 58%, and then Starstriders at 56%. So all factions are doing much better in GT Long. Then for underperforming factions, we have Legionary just at 44%, Commandos at 42%, Novitiates at 38%, Farstalker Kroot at 35, Hunterclade at 33, and then Intercession at 31. And as you can see in the chart, it's a smaller pool because we have excluded factions with 10 or less games in these formats, and also it's not as common of an event style, but you can see quite the swing. Like obviously Galapox showing they're way better at GT Long than they are normal, but they haven't won an event in this format. And then you oddly have teams like Legionary, Commandos, and Novitiates underperforming, and even Hunterclade, showing Hunterclade are only really doing pretty well at normal events and GT Plus. When it comes to these long format events where you're playing more rounds, more skilled players, it looks like Hunterclade are just falling apart, which is, as I said, we've seen this common times with multiple different factions ever since we've introduced GT Long. And this is the one time Vanguard haven't been doing really well in this format, so maybe they're starting to feel the nerfs a bit more. And then here's all the data for the placement. And for GT Long, so Nemesis Claw won 1 event. I believe that was the All Valley, I think it was Bay Area Open by Dakota from Squad Games. That just happened. Then we have Inquisitor Agents who won an event. Pathfinders who won the Dallas Open by Games Workshop, and then Exaction Squad who won my event, and then everyone else did not win an event. Galapox placed twice, Hieratech placed twice, Blades of Cain placed twice, right? So you've got this interesting correlation, and even Warp Coven and Corsairs won 2 GT Long events, which is amazing, but interesting data when we look at GT Long. And then here's just the placing percentage data. And looking at the charts, you can see Galapox once again showing they're more likely to go 3-1 than place, but they have a high percentage of both. Blades of Cain and Pathfinders averaging 50 to 40% for basically mirroring. So every Blades of Cain that went 3-1 and Pathfinders that went 3-1 placed, which is what Pathfinders have been doing consistently in all formats of the stats. And then as you can see, it tails off as we go further down, just because GT Long doesn't have many events. Then we've got the overall performance chart, combining everything into kind of like a median, so we can get a better look of, average of stats and stuff. It's been standardized more this time by Smiles, Lies, and Gunfire, so it just should look a bit more sensible. And then when it comes to performance chart, as you can see, Pathfinders are at the top because they've consistently shown throughout May that if you go 3-1 or more, you are very likely to place in the top 3 of the event, because they've done that for basically every format they've played in. Galapox, they have a higher win rate, but actually lower podium ratio. So they're going for like 3-1 or more really well. So like 3 wins or more with 1 loss, but they're actually not placing the top level of events as much. And then Hieratech having a really high win rate, but not as much in placement data. Then as you can see, Blades of Cain, they have a high win rate but low placement data. So they're not doing they have a low win rate but high placement data compared to that faction. So overall, Blades of Cain aren't doing well, but there's key players who are scoring well when they're playing that faction. And unfortunately, Intercession have really dropped down, but Kazakin this month taking the biggest L. Then we have the Compendium Data, and here's just all their percentages and stuff. No chance this time, just because, well, there's a lot of data to cover. And then here's our event list. As you can see, my first event up there at the top, but it's just showing all the events we've used just to kind of rationalize stuff. And now we go to the Q2 data. So this is basically all the data from the end of March up until the end of May. So 2 months worth of data covering like the latest balanced data slate changes to see how factions have been doing globally in this time frame, and basically kind of seeing what Games Workshop may use to buff and nerf teams with an upcoming balanced data slate at the end of June. So as you can see, once again, America leads the way with 79 events, you know, with 802 players. Then we have Spain with 779 players. So America winning out again. And then the United Kingdom with 314 players. So those are your top 3 most popular areas to play. Then you have Russia with 257. Then Australia with 159. Canada with 151. Poland 141. Argentina with 141. And then France with 95. And that's just the top 10. And obviously shout out to the Filipinos. Philippines represent. So for the Q2 win rate chart, here's all the data. So as you can see, overall, Wormblade with 273 games at 56%, Blooded with 333 games at 56%, Felgor Ravagers at 56% with 430 games, and then Galapox with 56% on 272 games. So very interesting when we're looking at all the combined data, because as we said, months can show quite swingy data when we go month to month. But overall, we've only had 4 overperforming factions, and only by minute amounts. Like, as I said, Galapox are just overperforming, and Felgor, even though they didn't do too well in May, they were just okay. Overall, they're overperforming. And then we've got Blooded shooting up this month with Wormblade as well. Nemesis Claw break at 53 games with 410 games, and Mandrakes with 423 games are at 53% as well. So interestingly, consistently good for the newest kill teams. Then for underperforming factions, we also have a small number. So Intercession are 44.8, which goes up to 45. So Intercession are just okay, like it's just fine. But we only have 2 major underperforming factions. So once again, it's Kazakin, 328 games, 42%, which is not great. Clearly, even though they were doing well kind of in April, May has not helped them at all. And then Scouts, who was surprised by this, 188 games, 41%. So we only have 2 underperforming factions. So looking at all the factions altogether, we've got a good spread. And the only low population being Strikeforce Justian and Chaos Cult at 74 and 77 games for Justian. But as I said, Chaos Cult have been doing very well, and they've got a decent win rate. And you can see teams like even Kroot and Breachers, who were underperforming 1 month and then winning the next, have Breachers on 48 and Farstalkers on 46. So those teams are technically doing fine. And as you can see with the chart where everything's rounded up nicely, you can basically see it more clearly where our 4 overperforming factions are Wormblade, Blooded, Felgor, and Galapox, and our underperforming factions are just Kazakin and Scout. So overall, at least win rate wise in general, we've had a pretty balanced meta, which is interesting because it didn't necessarily feel that way, but it looks like it is when you look at the overall stats. And then here is the placing data. And then for the overall placement, you can see Hierotech. They won 16 events, podium 37 times. Commandos won 12 events. Pathfinders won 12 events. Nemesis Claw won 12 events. Felgor won 11. Vet Guard won 11. Mandrakes won 10. Blooded won 8. Legionary won 8. Hunterclade won 7. Intercession, even though they had a middling win rate, they won 7 events. Wormblade won 7. Compendium won 7 events overall. And even if you look at Galapox, once again, they've only won 5 events, which is still really good, but isn't correlating as high with their win rate. And somehow even Scouts have won an event despite their middling results. And then here's the placement percentage data. And as you can see, most teams basically are averaging a close correlation to going 3 wins and 1 loss or better, with placing in the top percentage of an event. Although you can see it skewing higher with Vet Guard to an extent Pathfinders overall, Void Dancer Troop, Blooded, and even Galapox, although the highest is Hand of the Archon, who are very likely to go 3-1, but not actually place in the top percentage of an event. Now we have the GT Plus win rates overall. So once again, this is for 4 or more round tournaments with 16 or more players. So Galapox, 59%, proving they are way better in long format events than they are overall in shorter or just general events. Wormblade at 58%, Warp Coven at 57%, Chaos Co at 57%. So they are doing very well, although very low sample size. Then Inquisition at 57%, you know, with a decent player rate. Then Blooded at 56%, sorry. And Void Dancer Troop, Void Dancers at 56%. So, you know, I've seen people say they've been gutted. They've been gutted so hard. They've gone down from a 60% win rate overall to 56. Truly, this faction is dead. I mean, obviously they have less players, but it's just interesting. It's just a funny thing to see. Hunterclade at 55% and Hand of the Archon at 55% as well. Pathfinders just at 54%. Just not trying to overshoot it too much. And then for underperforming factions, we have Breachers at 45, so they're fine. Legionary at 44, Intercession at 40, and Scouts at 40%. And as you can see it with the chart where everything's rounded up more, now we have a wider spread of overperforming factions with Galapox, Wormblade, Warp Coven, Chaos Cult, Inquisition, Blooded, and Void Dancers. And then for underperforming factions, we just have Legionary, Intercession, and Scout. So Kazakin oddly doing way better in GT Plus than overall, going up to 47% from like 42. Then here's the data for placement data for GT Plus. And as you can see, Commando won 4 events and Pathfinders both winning 4 overall, with podiuming 10 times and 7 for Pathfinders. Galapox won 3 events, Hyrotech won 3 events and then podiumed 13 times. And then, as you can see, it averages out as we go further down, with Nemesis, Claw, and Mandrakes both winning 2 events and podiuming 6 and 5 times respectively. And then for placement percentage, here's the stats. And then for the chart, as you can see, most factions once again have a high ratio of going 3-1 than they do placing in the top cut an event, but it skews more with factions such as Inquisition, Galapox, and Blooded, but it's more closely correlated when you've got Mandrakes and Corsairs. Now we go on to the GT Long win rates for Q2, and at the top we have Inquisition at 65%, then we have Blooded at 61, Galapox at 61, Felgor at 56, and Pathfinders at 56 as well, with Warp Coven just hitting up at 55. Then everyone else kind of balancing out. Going down, we actually have, even though it's still a wide number of factions, it's less than we have in other GT Longs. So Kroot are at 44%, Legionary at 44%, Scouts at 41%, Kazakin crashing down to 38%, Intercession at 34%. And as you can see with the charts, better showing you the color-coded data, we can see overperforming factions once again. Inquisition, Blooded, Galapox, Felgor, Pathfinders, and Warp Coven are just fine, hitting at 55%. Then we have Kroot, Legionary, Scouts, Kazakin, and Intercession. And here's the placement data for GT Long. And as we can see on the chart, Inquisition actually won 2 events along with Pathfinders, the only factions to win 2 at GT Long, with Inquisition at 3 podiums and Pathfinders at 2. Then we had Felgor winning 1 event, Exaction winning 1 event, Commandos winning 1, and Nemesis Claw winning 1 as well. Whereas we've got a lot less of a spread. Galapox, Blooded, Hyrotech, Hunterclade, and Blades of Cain all didn't win an event in GT Long, but podiumed twice, and then Corsairs and Warp Coven also podiumed. And here's the percentage data for placement for GT Long. And looking at the chart, once again, you've got a close correlation for both, with most factions, where you've Blooded and Galapox, and Inquisition, where you have factions that are more likely to go 3-1 than place in the top percentage, and Vetguard actually topping out in this result for GT Long. And once again, here's the performance chart for Q2, covering all the combined factors. And if we look at the chart, you've got some interesting numbers. Now we look at the full Q2 data. So Blooded are the basically best performing faction in terms of very more likely to win their games, but still with a decent chance to place. Inquisition, oddly, with a really high performance wise. So they're actually, and when it comes to important events, they're either winning or placing them the most, which is not surprising on my part, but it's interesting to see. Pathfinders, you know, they're doing really well. Galapox, as I said, they have a Blooded thing where they're winning lots of games, but not actually winning events. Then Felgor doing a little bit worse than everyone, but still really good. Wormblade and Void Dancer troops just in their own orbit. Mandrake shooting up. Hierotek with a really, like, the bigger the circle, the more popular the faction is. So Hierotek doing worryingly well. And then as you can see, Commandos have dipped down a bit, right? They're still winning, but their win rate is kind of averaged out around 47%. Kazakin dropping off, and then at the bottom you have Scouts and Intercession. Intercession incredibly popular, and then you just have Scouts just like praying for any kind of help. And once again, here's the Compendium data overall. So win rate rise, Imperial Guard 62% win rate with 25 games, Space Marines at 50%. And then looking at below, you've got Talons at 44, Death Guard at 41, Grey Knights at 39, Greenskins at 39, and High Fleet at 38. And here's the Compendium placement data. And here's the event lists of all the past 2 months of events. So overall, this is quite a long review because I'm not just covering 1 month, I'm technically covering 3 months worth of data. So very interesting results. May had a very swingy month, but overall it was quite balanced. We only had a few factions overperforming and underperforming. And then when we looked at the Q2 data as a whole, we've only got 2 underperforming factions with 4 overperforming. As I said, Galapox have shown to be very popular lately. They're winning a lot of games, but not really winning events. And they're doing better in long format events. And then you've got Felgor still doing well. Mandrakes and Nemesis Claw are incredibly popular. Like, Mandrakes are currently the most popular faction. I think we haven't seen Eldari being a popular faction is the most popular faction since Void Dancer Troop dropped. So everyone's loving those Mandrakes. But even Nemesis Claw are doing really well, which is great, but just crazy. And then Hierotek Circle doing really well. You know, Inquisition becoming more of a problem as we go into long format events. Pathfinders showing they're still a big problem. Like, they won a lot of events. Them and Inquisition won the most and became more problematic as we go into larger format events. So just interesting to see. I mean, Scouts are just like praying for any kind of buff. It's really weird they didn't get a buff in the last balanced data slate. And then Kazakin are just hovering around, as well as Intercession. I don't know, it's like, I would like to see some kind of minor Intercession buff, but I don't think they will because of where they at in terms of being seen as a beginner faction. But like, I really don't want Kazakin being buffed again. But according to win rates, and even though some tournament data they should be, but who knows? We'll see when it comes up with the next balanced data slate. But it's actually really happy to see how close the meta is in terms of balance. Like, May was quite a swingy month. We've actually seen an effect where, because we have so many factions now, players, because we don't have the number of players to support all these factions, because once again, we have more factions than 40k does, which is ridiculous. So I think we're nearly at 36 factions now, or we're at 36 and going to go to 38. So there's not enough players to support all these factions, but we've still got a decent spread, and it'll be something I probably cover in another video. And then also we did exclude some events. So one thing is, when I was running my event, I asked Smiles, Lies and Gunfire to exclude buys, and then he did it for all events, and we noticed some interesting discrepancies. Not in general, like, we've caught fake events before, but we caught more instances of people manipulating pairings, which may just be, you know, unintentional, like buys and stuff. So we've eliminated all buys, and as a result, some events have been completely removed because they were mostly buys, which was weird. But all the data should be accurate. It's something I discussed with Dakota from Squad Games, so we may do something on that because it's interesting, because there's a slight rise with people trying to manipulate ITC events. But as I said, we've actually had a fairly even spread. We've only seen quite large variations when it comes to GT Long and GT Plus, where, you know, more for factions who are doing okay overall suddenly become a big problem, like Pathfinders, clearly. And even Galapox, they're showing more of a higher win rate when they win, but not actually winning the number of events that Pathfinders are. So they have a higher win rate than Pathfinders, and they're placing not too well. Like, they definitely have a high ratio of having 3 or more wins with only 1 loss, but they're not placing in the top cut of events as proportionally as you would see, whereas Pathfinders have a lower win rate, but have 1 more, and are basically, if you go 3 wins or greater with 1 loss, you've effectively placed in that event or podiumed or won it. So very interesting to see. I'm not happy to see the rise of Pathfinders, but, you know, maybe we'll see them finally, like, properly reined in. But we'll see. We should have the next balanced data slate in a month. So I'll do a recap of the June data, and I'll probably just quickly look over the June win rate, like going right up until the end of the next balanced data slate. But it'll be interesting to see. I'm kind of happy with where the meta has mostly leveled out. I'll cover like changes and stuff in another video, but it's pretty good. As I said, it's just the most interesting thing was we had less players this month, but more events. And then we've had more people moving away from other factions, basically going into Nemesis, Claw, and Mandrakes. But that's more like a kill team sustainability thing in general. But once again, thanks goes to Smiles, Lies, and Gunfire, because without him, none of this would be possible. But please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of the May and Q2 stats video. Did you like it? Did you find it helpful? Remember, I'll have an article version of this down in the episode description below, so you have all the images in case you want them, just keep them for yourself. And remember, I've got a Discord you can check out for free in the episode description below, an affiliate link Element Games, and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. And I'll quickly shout out my patrons. So for my Adepts of the Crit, I have Willax, Tom, Supercow, Sam, Nick, Mercenary Q, Kenzie, John Thomas, Graham, Freeman, David, Dave Meets World, Dad of Goldens, and then for my Veterans of the Crit, I have Sam Just. So thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot to me. Help support the channel. But yeah, that's pretty much it from me today. That was a big stats review. Perfectly in time for the week where Termination comes out, which I'm very happy about. But I might have some mysteriously special Saturday videos for you all to check out. But it should be cool. You know, we're going to have a very interesting week for Kill Team, and I can't wait to cover it all. But remember, no matter what the stats say, there's always a chance to win as long as you can roll a crit.